Hey guys, in this video, I'm going to give you guys an introduction to controlled articular rotations, also known as CARs. So, if you don't know already, a controlled articular rotation is taking a joint through its full active range of motion in a controlled manner. Now, why do we want to do these? The first and perhaps most important reason is to maintain the mobility that we have. Okay. Our joints are very much use it or lose it. If we don't use a range of motion, then our body is not going to spend energy preserving the tissues to keep that range of motion. So that's why over longer periods of time, our bodies get tighter and tighter and we lose more and more range of motion. Importantly, force is the language that our body's cells listen to. So obviously our cells, they're not conscious. We can't tell them what to do. The only way we can tell them what to do is through force. So what does that mean? We can either have external forces or internal forces working on our joints. An external force would be an external object pushing a joint into a certain range of motion. So take, for example, putting my arm on here and I'm leaning down, so this external object is forcing my joint into a certain range. Internal would be me without any objects moving a joint. So similarly, if I'm just lifting my arm like this, there's no external object forcing it into that range. So force is the only way that we can tell our joints what to do and what we need. So when we're doing a controlled articular rotation, we're inputting force into that joint throughout this range, and that's going to tell the joint, we need this. We need you to keep this. A good analogy is, say, a bodybuilder doing bicep curls. If he doesn't do bicep curls for, say, 2 months, his biceps are going to start to shrink. He's not going to be able to lift as much, and yeah, he's going to lose some muscle mass. CARs are no different. If we stop using ranges of motion, our body is going to lose the ability to go into them. All right, so that's why we have the daily CARs routine. So we're doing a couple of reps of these controlled articular rotations for every joint in the body. And that's going to help us maintain the mobility that we do have throughout our life. Okay, why else might we use CARs? Assessment. CARs are a great way to see where your mobility is at. So, sticking with the shoulder, just for example, if I'm doing a CAR and my shoulder only goes to here on the rotation and then can't get any further and my circle looks something like this. That shows me I'm missing a lot of shoulder flexion. Similarly, let's take, for example, the neck. If I'm doing my neck CAR and I'm not able to really turn my head very far, that's going to show me that I'm missing that range of motion. So CARs are great for assessing mobility. Another thing, warm-ups. CARs are the perfect exercise to do for warming up. You're taking your joint through its full active range of motion in a controlled manner. So you're basically preparing it for anything that you're going to throw at it in your workout. And it's also going to wake up your nervous system. So it's an awesome thing to do in warm-ups. And another one, rehab. When you have an injury, so say there's some damage done to some of your tissue. So it could be a muscle tear, could be ligament sprain, anything along those lines. In order to repair itself, our body creates cells called fibroblasts. Now these cells can become a lot of different types of tissue. So from a fibroblast, you can form a muscle, you can form a ligament, you can form a tendon, you can form fascia. And when we're recovering from injury, we need to tell these cells what they should become. Otherwise, they're going to kind of haphazardly just become something. And that's how we get scar tissue. So when we're rehabbing an injury, doing a controlled articular rotation in a pain-free range, so yeah, it's important that we're not going into pain in these cars. That is telling our cells, again, force is the language of cells, that is telling our cells what they need to become, and it's going to help them organize better as we're performing our rehab. All right, so a little bit about the daily routine. These are not super intense. So we're looking at about 30% effort and 30% irradiation. So I mentioned irradiation in another video. It's basically squeezing other muscles other than the one performing the exercise. So our daily routine does not have to be super intense. Like I said, it's that maintenance, it's that warm-up, it's that rehab, and that assessment. Now, we have different levels to cars. Level 2 cars is more of a corrective. So say for example, I notice when I'm doing my shoulder cars, I tend to turn my spine. A level 2 cars would be physically blocking movement from the spine in order to teach my body how to use the shoulder on its own. So, for example, I could press my body up against the wall and perform my cars from here. And that's going to block my spine from being able to move. So anytime we're using props or we're using something to restrain our body, that would be a level 2 cars. These ones are going to be a little bit more intense. So we're creating more irradiation in our body, and it's just going to be more difficult because we're not able to do those compensations that we're used to. Now, once we have the range of motion that we desire to do all the movements we want to do in our sport, we can progress to a level 3 cars. Now, level 3 is very high intensity. This would be possibly doing a loaded car, so you could hold a weight in your hand while you're doing your shoulder car. This is with a lot of irradiation. So again, we can use props, but this time we can use the props to create more force and more irradiation. So for example, with my shoulder car, I could take a wall ball and I could like squeeze this with my other hand while I'm performing this shoulder car with the other arm. And that's just going to help me to create more force, create a bigger contraction throughout the rep. And like I said, force is the language of cells. So the more force, the more response we're going to get from our body. Think of it like performing a back squat. When you're doing your max effort, you may not even realize it, but you're squeezing everything, squeezing every muscle in your body. It might even be more obvious in a deadlift. And if you're not squeezing every muscle in your body, then you're missing out on potential strength. And similarly, if we want to improve our back squat, we have to work above that, say, 70 to 80% range. Otherwise, we're just not going to get stronger. Progressive overload, we have to challenge our body and our cells in order to get that response and for our bodies to become stronger and for our cells to pay attention. And so that's why mobility training is strength training. It's all the same principles. Progressive overload, working at certain percentages of our maximum. And similarly in the rehab process, when we're coming back from injury, we're going to start squats, maybe with the body weight. That could be analogous to our level 1 cars. And then we could notice, oh, our knees are caving in, so we could use a band, push out against the band. Similarly, I'm rehabbing my shoulder, and I'm rotating the spine, so I'm going to block that out. And then now our shoulder, it has that range of motion, no pain, we're feeling strong, and we're going to really load that up. Similarly, our back squat, we're going to start lifting heavy once we got the form and we have no pain. So one more thing I wanted to mention with the cars. Again, you want to work through a pain-free range. So say for example, again, shoulder cars. Right here, I'm getting a pinch, it's feeling painful. I don't want to push through that. I want to make my circle slightly smaller to avoid that pain. So we're working through our maximum pain-free range. And if we do have that pain, again, assessment, that's giving us information. That's telling us, okay, maybe the joint capsule is restricted. Maybe we need to look at your internal and external rotation. So yeah, guys, a lot of information on there for cars. There's also a PDF document with a lot of the same information if you want to read through that. And as always, if you have questions, reach out to me in Slack and we can discuss these things in our mastermind calls. So get started with your daily cars. In our one-on-one sessions, I'm going to assess your cars, maybe give you some level 2 cars to correct some things, and then eventually we could start moving into the level 3. So that's what I got for you today on cars. See you in the next video.